was so official.
That's pretty good.
You may begin, sir.
We're live, too.
Everybody ready to go? Mr. Chairman, members of the County Commission, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Chris Dirksen. I am the consultant that's working with your staff and with the United States Environmental Protection Agency. A couple of their people are here. On looking at your development code, your land development code, and ways that can be revised to implement some of your ambitious goals in the Crawfordville Town Plan and also in the Big Bend Scenic Byway Plan. What I'd like to do for you this morning is, or this afternoon I guess, is to just give you a quick recap of what we're doing. We have a working group that we're really putting to work. They're going to be coming back to you with a list of priority suggested amendments to your development code to implement those plans, which are two of the key plans that you're all working on. And I think I'm not going to have them introduce themselves, but it's a group of about 20 people, including your staff members, members of agencies, the Regional Transportation Agency and other agencies who have really been engaged this morning. We're laying the groundwork, we're reviewing those plans and going through your development code. This afternoon, like I said, we're going to really dig into these codes, into the land development code, and come back to you all, hopefully, with some specific recommendations. I'm a land use attorney by training. I'm with a firm called Clarion Associates. We work around Florida and the United States on comprehensive plan and development codes. We've done a lot of work in coastal communities and in rural communities. Right now, we just finished the code in St. Lucie County. We're doing a new code for Daytona Beach, and we work in rural and tourism-based communities around the country. For example, we recently did the development code for Sun Valley, Idaho, for that county. So the reason I mention that, we're trying to bring that experience to the table here, because what my job here is to really present a menu of options for you all to consider in taking steps to implement the plan. I kind of joke that in the planning profession, old planners never die, they just lose their implementation. And we want to make sure that Louis and the planners here don't lose their implementation, and he's actually already been working on implementation of the Crawfordville Town Plan. What we'd like to do is, I'll do this very brief presentation. We'd like to start getting a little guidance from you all. Are we headed in the right direction in the approach that we're taking? You'll see that we're emphasizing removal of barriers and creating incentives, but also considering some new standards that you might put in your zoning code. So what I'd like to do is, once my presentation is over, go through each one of you elected officials, and it's great you all were able to attend, and get some guidance from you, and then perhaps hear from some of the planning commissioners. We have, till 1:30? And we'll definitely get you out of here by 1:30, because then we're going right back in with the working group. We're going to work till 3:30 or 4 on this effort. As you all probably know, this effort is funded by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. We have a couple of representatives here. You won the big prize. There were 500 communities that competed for a grant to get this technical assistance, and you were one of the chosen few, so congratulations on that. What I try to do, and I've been doing these workshops around the country, I first try to get a sense of what this community is like. Now, I'm from Florida. I live in Cocoa Beach. I've been up in this area, but frankly, I don't know it all that well, and so I try to immerse myself. And some very interesting things I learned about Wakulla County, which probably are not news to you, but it actually helps shape some of the recommendations that we're working on. One, you're one of the fastest growing counties in Florida. You've grown at an average rate of 3%. It's obviously slowed down like most of Florida has and most of the country has, but you've grown very quickly. 3% growth rate is very high growth rate. Around the country, the average is less than 1%. You got a lot of public land. I didn't realize you've got 2/3 of your land here. So the pressure when you have growth is on a much smaller area. You're a very auto-oriented community. 80% of your people commute to work by themselves in a car. Very few people walk. Most of your housing single-family. You have the highest rate of single-family housing I've ever seen. 84% of your housing is single-family. And I'm going to relate all this back to some national trends because it's going to pose some challenges to you all. You have pretty low number of jobs for the number of workers you have in the county, which means obviously people commute out to jobs elsewhere, and you have low retail sales, which means people are spending money elsewhere. And again, I know you're all trying to push economic development and creation of jobs here. There's some national trends that are important in the work we're doing with the working group because they affect you all. One is the fact that about 75% of the growth that's taken place in the country since 1990 has been in places like Crawfordville or on the edge, just outside of the edge of urban areas. And that's created challenges for protecting things like wetlands, forest land, ag lands. We're seeing a real change in housing demand in this country. In the past couple of decades, this country has built tons of multifamily or single-family housing, and now all the experts are telling us, and we're already starting to see it, that the demand in the next 10 years is going to be for multifamily. Predictions are that 90% of the demand for new housing in the next 10 years is going to be by households without children. It's going to be for small units. You don't have a lot of housing that will be demanded by the majority of the population. And the other thing we're seeing is people like myself, what's called the great senior sell-off. We're selling our houses now and moving to smaller units. About 60% of seniors who are going to vacate their single-family homes are going to move in multifamily units. We talked this morning about other issues. Another one, for example, is the whole issue of health. Obesity rate in the nation is skyrocketing out of control. It's worse in rural areas, and you have a very high obesity rate here. And one reason is we're not walking as much. We're designing our communities in such a way that people can't walk to work, they can't walk to school. I was over at your senior center, which is a wonderful center, and there's no sidewalks leading to the senior center. And so we've been designing communities that aren't walkable. The reason I mention that is the Crawfordville Town Plan, and you have your consultant here who worked with John Sewell of Kimley Horn. It's one of the key recommendations of your town plan is to make the Crawfordville area more walkable. I'll come back and talk about that. You got two major plans here in the county, and that's what we really focused on. You've got this Crawfordville Town Plan, which I know you all have been working on for a number of years. You're familiar with it. It's got a host of recommendations in it, and the code, the Land Development Code, is going to be a big part of making sure that that happens. And you also have the Big Bend Scenic Byway Plan. It's an excellent plan. It has a lot of economic development potential, and one of the things that they focus there is protecting those resources that make this area special. Crawfordville, I just want to very briefly remind you what's in these plans, because now I'm going to talk with you about some of the recommendations that we put on the table that I want to get your reaction to. The Crawfordville Town Plan, for example, says we ought to be improving the walkability and potential for bicycles. We ought to have different housing choices. We ought to have some multifamily housing in the downtown. We talked about things like encouraging a mix of land uses here in the downtown. Let me see. I'll come back to Crawfordville in a second. This, I've told people, is the biggest, the most important slide, the most important message, is to think big. What we've really been focusing on, and I base this on talking with Commissioner Arts and your staff, we've really been focusing on removing barriers that are in the code. For example, the Crawfordville Town Plan says, well, we would like more residential downtown, but your two commercial zone districts, C4 and C2, don't allow residential. That's an easy fix. We can change that to allow that mixed-use development. So we've been really concentrating a lot on removing barriers. We've also been talking about incentives. An example of that is your plan, both plans say, let's preserve some of these beautiful trees in the forest that we have. And you have tree protection regulations. Anybody who's developed in an urban area knows it's very difficult to protect trees in an urban situation. It's much more difficult. I've suggested, for example, an incentive might be give those people extra land savings credit. Instead of just 1 for 1, give them 2 for 1. So those are kind of incentives. And then we're also talking about regulatory gaps. There are some areas where I'm recommending you look at what other communities have done. In this instance, for example, the Scenic Byway Plan says we should protect scenic views, and when some people build a new commercial development. Well, right now your landscaping ordinance doesn't provide adequate screening, so that may be one area you want to consider. Now, just again to emphasize what I've done, and Commissioner Moore knows this, is I'm putting a menu out there before you, and you all then, you'll need to pick and choose from that menu. Some things may fit, but what Orange County is doing in a particular instance, that's the Orlando area, that may not be a good fit here. What St. Lucie County is doing, that may be a better fit. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick out a few of these because I want you guys to be able to comment. I'm just going to pick out 1 or 2 in each one of these slides to tell you what we're thinking about. I already mentioned how in removing barriers, the Crawfordville Town Plan, it says, look, we want to have more mixed-use development, more residential downtown that will create an atmosphere where people can shop, create a market for the businesses. I've already talked here about how you can revise the C4 and the C2 zone districts to allow residential. Another thing I noticed, you have some of the I would call most excessive parking requirements of any ordinance I've looked at. Good example, if I want to build an office here, I have to have 1 parking space for every 200 square feet of my office. Most jurisdictions, it's 1 per 400, so you're requiring twice as much. Well, what does that do? 1, that's costly to the developer. A surface parking space with the land and the paving can cost $2,000 to $5,000. So if you're making me overpark by 10 spaces, that's a chunk of change. The second thing is that the Crawfordville Town Plan says, let's have more compact development so people can walk. It's hard to have compact development when you've got to have a lot of parking and you're spreading it out. So I think there's a couple of easy fixes there, kind of thing we're talking about. Incentives. Most jurisdictions now will allow credit. If I have some on-street parking spaces, and John Sewell in the Crawfordville Town Plan shows a section that the Florida Department of Transportation will allow for 319 that will have on-street parking. Most jurisdictions in a modern code would allow you to count that towards your off-street parking requirement. So the off-street parking helps you reduce that bigger parking lot into size. What does that do? Saves money, allows for more compact development. That's another, I think, an incentive here that you could easily implement without a whole lot of problem. Regulatory gaps. There's some simple ones. Most jurisdictions, in addition to having off-street parking, have bicycle parking requirements. Now, you've got this fabulous new trail plan and bike plan, and you're going to have these people from Tallahassee and from Sarasota and other places. They're going to be bringing their $1,000 bicycles down here, and they're not going to have any place to lock it up and park it. Most jurisdictions have requirements for bicycle parking, and they allow you to reduce the off-street parking a little bit to provide that. So that's one thing we've suggested. Another one I want to bring to your attention. Right now, your commercial zone districts allow all kinds of auto-oriented uses. Car washes, auto sales, storage. You really need to think, if you have a new zone district for this Crawfordville Town Plan area, and that's what I've recommended, you need to think, what are the uses you really want to allow there? Do you really want to have storage uses there? Do you really want to have car washes and auto sales? Right now you allow this big variety of uses. You need to ask yourself, is that something that really is going to fit in the downtown that you want to create in that plan? So that's one of the more ambitious regulatory things we're talking about, but I told you I was going to lay things before you in a menu. All right, very briefly now, what about the Scenic Byway Plan? The Scenic Byway Plan has a lot of voluntary type of issues and recommendations, but it also, here are some of the things it recommends. Preserve the natural historic sites and natural area. And that makes a lot of sense. That's why people are coming here to see, and they say, well, let's preserve them. You can preserve them by buying them, but there's probably not enough money going around, so you need to think about other ways. It says promote native vegetation. It also says improve ped and bicycle connectivity. So we've looked at those recommendations, and we've gone through the same process: barriers, incentive, gaps. Now here's one thing I'd like you to think about. Right now, in many rural jurisdictions, they are allowing rural residential development, but they allow something called cluster or conservation subdivisions. I'll give you an example. Let's say I've got 100 acres and I'm in your RR5 zone district. That means I can do 20 units. Now I could do 20 units, just chop it up, just one after another. Or I could do a cluster subdivision where I would do my 20 units, and I would do them, instead of doing 5-acre lots, I'd do 2.5-acre lots. And then I would have 50% of the land I could preserve. And here's the scenic byway, so you'd still have the nice open space along the scenic byway. Your code doesn't allow that. There's some language about in one section that says we might consider it, but it's really inadequate. So now, an incentive in most of the cluster subdivisions that I draft, we say, listen, if you'll do one of these cluster subdivisions, we'll give you 4 extra units. Instead of 20 units on that 100 acres, we'll give you 24, but they're only going to be on 2.5-acre lots, so you still preserve 50 acres. So it seems like it's more of a win-win situation. But that's something where your code really does not allow that. Incentives. We already talked about the incentive for preserving trees, and I think that's important. Another thing you could do is in some of these rural zone districts, again in an RR5, if somebody, for example, if there's a historic building on that site, why not give them a couple of extra units of bonus density if they preserve that historic site? And what about regulatory gaps? This is one thing I do think you need to consider. Right now, your landscaping standards are very suburban oriented. That was probably copied from a suburban code somewhere. You really do not have any standards that apply out in a rural area. If somebody builds a commercial development, to make sure that commercial development is screened. And I noticed yesterday driving down 98, you'd be driving along and you'd come to a nice building that was built, but somebody just cleared the site, chopped all the trees down, and then they planted these little whips, landscaping. You can do better than that. You can require some fencing. You can require some more dense landscaping. But this is a regulation, so you all have to decide if you want to go that far. I submit to you it's going to be important to preserve those assets, and it's easy to do. It's not that much more difficult to do a fence and some decent landscaping, and really will make that business more attractive. So that's a really quick tour. We spent about 3 hours this morning going through what I just did in about 15 minutes. But that's kind of where we're going. We're looking at removing the barriers, trying to create incentives, but we are considering some regulations, and hopefully this afternoon with this group, we're going to try to set some priorities. What's some of the low-hanging fruit that Louis and his staff could work on? And by the way, in the Crawfordville Town Plan area, you probably know that the staff has already drafted some sort of interim regulations to start implementing it. So with that, what I'd like to do, and maybe I'll start with Commissioner Arts, and she's been involved in all of this and has been very accommodating, took us on a tour, and it's been very useful. Just have her give some insights. I'm interested in hearing from you all. Are we headed in the right direction? Are there issues related to Crawfordville and the scenic byway that you didn't see up there that you're hearing from your constituents? I didn't mention I was an elected city official in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I served on the city council for 2 terms. I listen to my constituents just like you do, and you may be hearing some things that we haven't really surfaced here. So I'd like to do that, and then also ask the planning commissioners for their thoughts.
Well, and Commissioner Arts, I think Randy could get to lead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I really like a lot of the things you've had to say, especially, Jerry, I'm sure you'll agree, the incentive everything instead of just telling people they have to do something. The extra density, that makes sense from the business side, and I think it accomplishes a lot of the goal. And, I mean, I was expecting to hear, you need to do this or you need to do that, but I really like your approach is incentives is a lot better to me than, you get a lot more peas with honey than you do with vinegar.
Well, you do, but I will say this, the analog of that is, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, sometimes a smile in a six-shooter works better than a smile alone. So we have recommended some, we have recommended some regulations. I'm going to try to tell you what I think, but it'll be up to you to say whether that's acceptable or not.
Maybe it's time for that.
Okay.
But, I mean, everything you've said so far sounded really good to me.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I have to leave.
Well, we appreciate you coming. I know,
Thank
being
you.
an elected official myself, I know you. I know it's a high-paying job you have here, but
It's not as bad as everybody thinks it is. It's only as hard as you want to make it. I can tell you that.
you get a free meal once in a while.
Free meal, that's right. And free T-shirts every month.
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
I'll pass it back to Commissioner Arts and
Okay.
be glad to.
Well, I really like the way that with each of these topics or plans, we started out looking at barriers. And that to me just seems like, what we need to address first. If we have things in place that are prohibiting what we've all agreed we'd like to see, then shoot, get rid of them. And then I think the incentives, we've all talked about how we really want to use incentives, and I think they're great incentives identified. And then the progression to the regulatory gaps. And I appreciate your being frank with us. And if an area has incentives have been tried and aren't very effective, so if we really want to accomplish what we're talking about, then we may need to add a few regulations.
Are there any issues you think, now that you've sat with this for a day or so, that we've missed that we should be talking about this afternoon?
Well, I know Louis has been very interested in the retrofitting, and so I don't know if there's more that we could talk about in that area. Although you did give a nice example where you changed the coverage from 60% to 100%, how you can come in with additional, and that could be a solution to Winn-Dixie. Stormwater, how do we get there? And LID, that's a big problem, and I haven't heard much along those lines.
Talk about some of that this afternoon.
But I appreciate all the time you spent really studying and learning what our code says and what the problems are. I think you've done a great job.
Thank you very much.
Alan, what? Oh.
Commissioner Moore already just cringe at all things planning.
Really, I'll go ahead.
In a few minutes. I like a lot of what you had to say. I'm glad you brought up parking. I was thinking about it when you said it was actually one of the things on my list I was trying to change when I first got elected.
Oh, really?
And then we got into, because I had a friend I was talking to, a person I saw often, who was thinking about opening up a better type coffee shop down here. And they were concerned about the parking requirements. I was trying, and they talked about them, they were ridiculous. I mean, they are, and you can't really do it.
Yeah.
And it fell by the backside. I'm glad to hear you talking about it again, because I think that's really important.
Good.
I think that is a big step we'll need to take. No, I think most of what you said is really nice. Wakulla County has the, last time I checked, so it could be, the new numbers may be different, but last time I checked we had the highest per capita income and the lowest per capita taxes in the Big Bend. We have over 30,000 people. We should have people wanting to live here, and we should have people wanting to shop and work here. And we do. We have a lot of people want to live here. But they do all their shopping and playing in Tallahassee. I know some people think it's going to be hard to get Crawfordville to become more a walkable, shoppable community. I don't have grand visions. For some reason, all the other communities in North Florida formed little downtowns, and Crawfordville never really did. I just want us to be like Mayo. That's the goal I aim for, is Mayo. If Mayo can have a walkable downtown, we can have a walkable downtown. So I'm optimistic. I'll be right back. Step up for a second.
Thanks for what you've done. I appreciate that. I'm sure Lynn appreciates it. You know what you're doing. I just have some comments that I want to make. It's sort of like getting it on record. I've been in towns where that we started from a small town, we went to a large town, we had overlays, and that sort of thing, and a lot of it's good. Some of it is restrictive as heck. Some of it's anti-business. It's whatever. As I start, I agree with basically probably 80-85% of what you said. But I just want to read some notes that I had. And John Sewell, I don't mean to jump on you, but I'm just going to give you. This is my opinion.
But he will, John, if last night is any, just kidding.
That's not a problem. That's not a problem. But my opinion is that visioning is all the same. It has the same questions to arrive at a predetermined solution with no relation to the cost and or the restrictions or property rights. That's a general statement. Crawfordville is not a destination. The coast is the destination. Sopchoppy, St. Mark's, Panacea, St. George, and Appalach. Those are our destinations. Nobody comes here and says, isn't this a cute little town, and I think I'll just stay here and walk around and ride my bicycle around. As I mentioned yesterday, in my opinion, walkable occurs in town squares and our congested old towns, platted 200 or 300 years ago. Walkable, in my opinion, does not work without a population density and the absence of parking. And Florida only grew when we developed air conditioning, both for our homes and for our automobiles. It's just very hot here. There's 6 or 7 months of the year. If we didn't have air conditioning, we would not have half the people that we have. It's not that the inland is so beautiful. It's just with air conditioning we can survive that heat. Wakulla County has 3 industries, and whether you like it or not, it's real estate, it's retail, and it's recreation. And our coast is part of the recreation, and part of that recreation, probably 90% of that recreation income is derived from fishing. It's a huge economic engine for our community. And as I said earlier, 80% of your presentations today would be non-restrictive to property rights. And in my opinion, 20% of this vision and 20% of that streetscape would absolutely kill retail development. I don't know anybody today who's going to volunteer on their own, build right up on the street and have your customers walk in from the back door. I'm not going to do it, and I don't know anywhere else that it's being done. It's done, and I've seen it, and I've got a list of vacancies where it has been done. But those 3 items are, and let's see, which is. But the 20% that I dislike would kill the real estate and retail, which is our economy. Real estate, retail, and fishing, that's our economy. Part of yesterday's presentation, and I didn't get in this today, said that we should restrict development outside of the town plan. I voted for the town plan, and I voted for it because we could see what was coming, hopefully. But when I hear the words that we need to restrict development outside of the town plan, restrict development in Stop Choppy, Medart, Panacea, okay.
We're not suggesting that.
Well, okay, fine enough, I just want to get that out.
We were suggesting, just to make clear, that, for example, the commercial development that's starting to strip out along 319 south of the bridge, that you need to think twice about allowing some of those uses that would be better situated going here.
That is a restriction on the individual property rights of the people who own the property.
Well, I understand that. That's what
Okay.
zoning is all about.
That's correct, and we disagree on
Yeah,
that.
no,
So, not a problem. If we talk about restricting development in other parts of our county, then we're removing the individual property rights to drive business into this town center. As we go forward, it would be nice if we could have a population of 30,000, if we could have a in-town center that was whatever. We have it on a linear location. I don't know of a new, there's some old linear locations, but I don't know of a new linear location that's like what we're trying to do here. But I guess my greatest objection would be to that maximum setback. That's horrible from a retail standpoint. But I do appreciate your presentation. You have your work, and I have my ideas. So thank you so much.
Good. I did want to tell you, we ate last night at the Hammer Knockers, and that is an example of where they have rear parking that it seems to be succeeding pretty well, and they're built up to the street. So you do have a few examples in your community, but I think generally you're right. Retailers would now prefer to have some parking in front.
Yeah. Do you know where the word Hammerknockers comes from?
No.
You need to know that. It's the local definition of a redneck. It truly is, and it's only indigenous to a very small part. It's really tight in Wakulla.
That's good. Well, we had good full.
It's a great name. It's a great name.
We recycled some of our consulting fee there last night.
Yeah, good for you.
Actually, we have the plan commissioners. We've got another. If we could just do the same with the planning commissioners. Mike's been here listening already. So
It's Chuck.
Maybe, I'm sorry. That's Chuck. I'm sorry. I knew it was Chuck. We'll have Chuck since he was been here, and then maybe we'll go to Brett since they've been here,
And Judith was at the
yes,
presentation
she was
last night.
So, Chuck, Mike, will you please?
Well, to me, the visioning systems process we went through in developing the town plan is extremely important, I think, for a livable community. And I understand, your ideas all sound really good to me. I just get upset when I hear people say that we can't restrict things in the county to allow these processes to take place where we want them to take place. Without doing some type of restriction, without incentivizing moving into the town center, we're not going to develop a town center. And so I feel it's real important for us to come up and be able to say no to certain developments, and say no to certain activities outside of town center so we can get the development we want to happen inside the town center. And, I want a walkable community. I want to have, a Starbucks, a movie theater, all these kind of things where I don't have to drive to Tallahassee, because I don't like doing that. Okay, but I don't have any option because we don't have those things occurring here, and we won't have them here until we have a community, an area where people will go and collect, and gather, and do things together. And that's what we're going to have in this community.
Okay. Brett?
Well, I respect what Chuck is saying and what all the commissioners have said. It's a tough nut. A lot of planned communities. I see what you're working with now. It's very difficult to do. Chuck and I serve on the planning commission together, and I'm aware of some of Chuck's concerns. I think you have to start, you've got to have a nucleus, you know, and the courthouse serves, I think, at this point in time, as the courthouse square to start. Most of the communities that people are speaking about, Mayo, you know, Gadsden County or Quincy, those types of Jefferson County, Monticello, occur around the courthouse. So it is a starting point. I also agree with the idea of incentives. I think, you know, I would welcome if you're going to create offices or small shops or something to have mixed occupancies, not mixed use, but mixed occupancies of the same building. Where you could have people who could work upstairs, work downstairs if they chose, or have some sort of working office downstairs so that you have a working community in the evening. Not that everybody vacates it at 5 p.m. But you got to start somewhere, and however that is. And I'm aware of Chuck's concern about building out. You know, the town center will always be the town center. We have to have things outside for ultimately your big box stores. They're gonna come. Ultimately they will be here, just like Walmart, just like Home Depot. If there is a movement, if there is a retail business, they've got to have somewhere to locate that's not in the town square. So it has to be outside somewhere. Now, how you restrict that, I do not know. I've seen a lot of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about, those types of uses would fit in the Crawfordville town plan area, which is quite extensive.
Just as a point of clarification, the plan basically calls for a dense urban core area. Just to the north of that, along 319, would be the corridor where you have your big box, your Lowe's and Home Depot and those types of things. It's still within that core with the idea of preserving the infrastructure.
What I was suggesting and talking about limiting development elsewhere would be outside of the
I understand.
outside the plan. 319, Highway 90.
And your incentives, your idea of incentives are great. I like the idea of maintaining existing trees. I'm both, you know, I come at this as I kind of cheat. I'm an architect and a landscape architect, licensed in both professions. But I've seen a lot of trees saved for trees' sake. Should never have been saved. It was saved for debit-credit relationships. I've been a part of it. I've done it. You know, I hate to say it, but I mean, hired from a developer standpoint, you've had to do it, working inside community LDRs. But I like the idea, if you could particularly tie the saving of trees to reductions in parking, because those large trees typically occur in the most inopportune area on the site. But if we could reduce the parking associated with that, which also drives up the natural green space, reduces impervious surface area, and I think, like you say, right now you have a very high use of parking, or you've got a very large requirement devoted to parking. And it's almost like you're anticipating a problem we don't have right now. Stormwater is an issue. Will be ultimately always be an issue. But you know, right now, if you reduce the parking level, if in the future it becomes a problem, you drive that ratio back up. But for right now, reduce it in some manner and drive your green space up. Try to assist in the on-site percolation of stormwater. You know, keep your microclimates, your heat indexes down. Do those types of
A lot of benefits. Yeah. Good.
One thing I haven't heard from the board is the multifamily option, which we don't have.
Right.
And I think that's something to look at. We have a lot of subdivisions, many empty homes, and an aging population. And I think I think in some ways we've looked at multifamily housing in the past as a negative thing. And I think for many aging boomers, it can be a very positive thing. So I'm hoping we can make some changes there.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Well, just to echo the use of land, you know, we have a big issue with wetlands protection. And it seems like we could incentivize for developers. What we have is a lot of land that's developable with parts of it that aren't. And I think we could create incentives for thoughtful development of those.
You know, Chris, if I can echo one other thing, and your idea of incentives is hang the carrot out there and after we said some things, we talked about the ARB. I also serve on the ARB. But the reality of the situation, something you said made some sense there, is if you study the town of Seaside, they put together a development language. It's a graphic, pictogram study, new urbanism, the whole spiel. And then for Louis, keep it in the LDR for the downtown development plan. A certain percentage of the facades have got to be whatever you want them to be. Brick, what do you want them to be? EFS, what do you want them to be? Hardy board siding. I mean, that's a little more residential than I'd like to see, but some sort of percentage to where he could implement in the downtown plan. I think that would be very beneficial. If you built to a zero lot line in the downtown area and gave somebody the incentive, reduction of parking, more floor area or something, if they created sidewalks in front of the building, canopies over top of the windows and doors, where you had a shaded canopied area somehow. Those types of things that he can implement. The problem is even justice. I've been involved in working with these things too many times. The administrators come back later on and say, I don't want to be the person that has to make this.
I don't want the discretion.
I don't want the discretion.
We hear it too.
And that's
you have to give clear standards, so it's not
that's the tough part. It's got to be described in a manner that even the person, the developer, can understand it. It doesn't need to be nondescript or.
And pictures help.
Excuse me?
Pictures help. I mean, design standards with pictures.
Graphic pictograms are very beneficial.
Zero lot lines, I think, are a good thing also.
I really like the conservation subdivisions, especially along the Big Bend, to try and, buffer. Because I'm really concerned about the appearance of the Big Bend Scenic Byway over time and how that's going to change in a negative way unless we put in place some things to preserve the native vegetation and the views and whatever.
I've been in communities where you drive along a road like that and there's development there. You just can't see it from the road. All you see is the sign that directs you to it. And then you go back and you see it's there. It's wonderful. And that's what we need to have along the Scenic Byway, is that kind of...
I basically agree with this gentleman here in that I have no desire for metal storefronts, open bay fronts. We were talking about sidewalks the other day. I think that all developments should have sidewalks. I think you do a canopy awning on buildings. I think you mentioned yesterday that you didn't want to turn over your architectural to a group of architects and on the approval. But in tongue in cheek, really, is that to approve the architectural design, you leave it to your staff instead of getting it out and getting confused and everybody having their own idea. I have a piece of property north of town that I'm going to be developing. I have 3 live oaks in that piece of property. There's not a day goes by that I'm not agonizing over how those things are going to sit. I'm going to do everything within my power to stay out of the way of those live oaks. They're just absolutely too beautiful. So we don't cut and burn. That maybe somebody does, but it just improves the appearance. If it improves the appearance, more people come.
Absolutely. All the studies show that if you have good landscaping and good tree, more people will shop.
In other places, I've done cloth awnings and stuff that are underlit and whatever, but. Yes, I agree that a lot of what you said, is very good. I'm not totally crazy.
I don't think you are. You're raising a good question. I do want to clarify for Brett what I said was that the architects ought to help set the standards ahead of time, and then instead of having the debating side, which you guys like.
Well, I agree. When you said it, I mean, I sit on the Tallahassee Young County Architectural Review Board. In fact, they're meeting today. I'm missing that meeting here. But the reality of the situation is that so many times I have been involved, and I agree with what you said. I've been involved with boards, and I don't always agree with either way. But I've been to where they beat people up to the point to where I finally stand up and say, you've got to tell these people what they got to do.
Exactly.
You cannot send them back. I've resigned from commissions on that baseline before. I resigned from another one before this one for that very reason. You have to be able to be even-handed. And when you said take it out, I got thinking about it. I thought, that'd be wise if you could describe it. Because if you look at the seaside town plan, I mean, they tell you they want metal roofs, they want brick facade, they want this type of facade, they want that type of facade. If you broke it down and you gave Louis staff that sort of depiction and say, we want 20% of the facades, it has to be this, or you want this much in fenestration, or what, I don't know, I don't care at this point in time. I mean, I care, but you know what I'm saying. But give it to where it can be even-handedly agreed to, and that even the developer or the landowner or whatever, because I do agree with Commissioner Moore to some degree. Not everything he says I agree with, not everything I say he agrees with. Property rights are in fact property rights. It's a difficult choice to impinge upon. I've seen people, I've done this for 30 years now. It's frightening to think I'm this old.
But hey, look, I've been doing it for 40 years. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
Not every land use regulation, I don't care how well you describe it, it's a generalization. Not every property will fit it. It just doesn't.
Now, one thing that reminds me, Commissioner Moore, that we talked about, and I forget who, maybe someone raised it. In most of the codes we draft today, we have something called an administrative modification provision, so that we would allow, in your case, for example, Louis could modify the parking number that you needed by 10%, or he might be able to change a setback by 10% if it would accommodate preserving those trees, and do that without you having to go to a public hearing, getting a variance or getting a rezoning or something like that. So that's one thing we want to add that to our list of recommendations here of this, administrative modifications, some more flexibility.
I only have one thing on that statement, and I still want to get that back. That maximum setback, that goes against my whole soul.
Well, this is that zero build to line that Commissioner Brock was talking about. I mean, that's a major issue for the Crawfordville downtown plan. Or what are you going to, where is that line going to be? Are you going to let some people set back and other people come up? Are you going to get through there through incentives? But that's a big issue you all are going to have to grapple with. So I'm going to come over here real quick. We've got one more commissioner. Dale?
Heard a lot of good points, so just wait and see what happens.
Do you have any experience with any of these developments, and in your planning commission, any major issues that but do you have major issues that we're not addressing here, you think? Okay.
One thing you said last night talked about that as the county grows, so does the need for recreation facilities in various parts of the county. Yep. And that's something that I think has come back to bite the way we've done single-family developments.
Well, this is one of the regulatory things, it may seem very, sort of cutting edge here, but in fact, we have not drafted a zoning ordinance in the last 10 years where subdivisions weren't required to set aside some land for recreational facilities. And good developers will do that anyway.
That's correct.
If they don't, then those people are going to come back to you and say, commissioners, where's the park? We got a park in the south part of the county. Where's our park?
That's right.
Which they do already.
No, you go.
So that's one of the regulatory recommendations that I've said, look, you ought to at least think about that, of having...
I agree with that. I want to ask you a question, and I wonder this because in listening to you speak, it's very apparent that you write codes from around, and I don't know if you come in at the ground level or not. Most codes that I have dealt with in the last 30 years have been generated by Muni Code. I know the Langfords, they generate them hand over fist.
Yeah.
They're very generalized in that regard. Do you guys start from ground up, or do you take the existing codes and try to help modify?
Well, it depends. And,
Is your organization a lot like Muni Code?
No.
No, it's not at all. I didn't think
First of all, we're small, but
okay.
No. A variety of things. There may be some communities that say, look, we don't have time. It takes 2 years to rewrite a development code.
Oh, easy.
A year to 2 years. And some communities say we need some fixes. For example, we are rewriting Daytona Beach's development code. We're in the second year of that process. And in the middle of it, they created something called an entertainment zone. And they said, guys, we want you to go draft that entertainment zone right now. So sometimes the community will come in and say, just, make some fixes, take care of the procedures, or here's some problems. Other ones, they do it comprehensively. And sometimes they do. We did one in Henderson, Nevada, where we had some quick fixes that we made in the first 6 months, and then we spent 2 years doing the big code.
Well, I also agree with Judith, and we don't have enough parks. Our children are,
Well, I say that because when I was on a city council in Fredericksburg, Virginia, the city had not grown for many years, and it annexed about a 20 square mile area, and the zoning code didn't require any recreation. So a couple of subdivisions got built. What do you think those people in the said? Where's our park? And so they wanted us to raise taxes, and as I've explained to people, I'm a tight Mennonite. I had a hard time voting for that.
I do agree with that. I have no problem with that. I'm an advocate for child sports, young sports. That's the only taxes that I'll raise. Anything else is a no-brainer. But we do have in the county, you missed one thing, we do have in the county a subdivision that had 500 acres, and they negotiated with the county, and they built, instead of 1 on 5, 1 on 20, or whatever, they built 1 on 1, and they reduced their imprint. And now that subdivision has 200 acres of conservation easement.
That's great. I hadn't heard about that. Which one is
It's
that?
called the Park. The Park, it's down Spring Creek Highway, almost at 98.
I may have, actually.
It's a circle. If you've got the...
Let me just see here. I had an image here that
It's a nice subdivision. Homes are about 200,000.
Yeah, I thought I had an image in here. I guess I didn't. I'll make you sick, but I can do this real quick.
One you had was a farm, I think.
Was it what?
Farms.
That's what it was. Well, no, but anyway, I don't have it in here. I had another one here because I did find a conservation subdivision. I didn't know whether it had been built here or not.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any others, but I do know that one set aside 200 acres of conservation easement.
That's great.
Was that because of karst features and things like that? I'm just asking because I know they've had a lot of sinkhole problems with the houses there.
They had a perception of sinkhole problems, but that property had nothing to do with that. The developer, working with the county, set aside the 200. It was to his advantage.
Sure.
I mean, he doesn't have to build a road. He builds 90% less streets.
You can see in that exactly. That's one of the big advantages.
It's a definite advantage.
Right there. That guy doesn't have to build near as many streets if he had to crisscross that entire property.
If you can sell 10 1-acre lots and build on them, it's a whole lot better than selling 1 10-acre lot and building on it. So it's to his advantage to do that. But they did it, and it's a nice subdivision. They got the interior of that is all park.
That must have been negotiated though, because your code was that a PUD or PUD? So that's
It was probably negotiated. Yes, I'm sure it was.
But your suggestion is just to make it so it can automatically happen.
Yeah, so that it's a form of subdivision that you can do without having to do negotiation. Now, they still may want to do a PUD, and that's what happens in a lot of communities. Nothing wrong with that. But, make what you want as easy as what you don't want.
Chris, I have a couple of quick questions, and I don't want to cut into their time too much, but on the question of approving in Crawfordville versus not approving outside of Crawfordville, do you think a strategy like transfer development rights would work, or is that just kind of, are there too many barriers to do that?
You're talking about commercial?
I mean, really either, the principle of applying some type of an additional entitlement in the area versus not developing outside the area.
I've never seen a commercial PUD work. I mean, we've drafted quite a few residential PUDs. I'm sorry, TDRs. You know what a TDR system is I think I mentioned yesterday, we drafted one.
Could you please speak into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. We drafted one for Deschutes County, Oregon, where they had done a subdivision in the wrong spot, and we wanted them not to develop there, so we created a town growth area, and for the developers there, they had to go out and buy a development right from these people over here who had unbuildable lots in this wetland area. So that was a residential TDR, but that only worked because there was a lot of demand for development for residential growth in that other area. So I think it'd be a stretch. It might, if you had a lot of demand for development here in the corridor.
The other question I had is related to recreation open space. The county has, on that board behind Chuck, a lot of ambitious plans for multiple trails throughout the county. And would it be possible for like subdivisions versus having them try to do their own on-site park or open space?
Absolutely.
Contribute to the
Absolutely.
county's offers to
I agree with that.
And
Yeah,
that's
I can agree with that.
And in fact, what you do is because they're going to open it to the public. Now, somebody may want to do that because it's an amenity, but another thing you can do is you can say, well, look, the county has a standard right now that you say that you want to, it's 5 acres per 1,000. That's what your policy documents say, that you want to have 5 acres of parkland per 1,000 people. So you have a developer come in, and he's got to give you several acres, and you allow him to subtract from that the trail that he puts in. I mean, that's pretty standard. We would write an open space ordinance that say anything that you dedicate to the public, you get credit, and maybe you get extra credit for dedicating it rather than just setting it aside for the residents of your development.
We need a sports complex north of town. It needs to be large. So taking this into consideration, and let's say that you got 6 developers coming in the next 6 years, and each of them got to do 5 acres. Or we got 10 developers, each of them having to do 5 acres. Allow the county or some entity to pick up the 50 acres and let the 5 acres go toward the credit of the 50 acres.
It's called fees in lieu or land in, exactly. We
But
usually typically...
that way we could get our large size recreational complexes put in instead of a small one field.
Exactly.
We need large fields, and we need them north of town.
And some jurisdictions, I mentioned I'd worked in Franklin, Tennessee. In Franklin, Tennessee, you do a private open space set-aside, and then you do a public land, you either dedicate it on your site, or you contribute money to a pot so that the county can go out, or the city can go out and buy a larger site, because the city doesn't want a lot of 1 acre sites that they have to manage. They're a pain.
Yeah. Would you talk a little bit more about your recommendation that instead of an overlay district, we maybe want to look at a zoning district for downtown Crawfordville? Because all we've ever been talking about is the overlay.
Yeah. Well, you all understand that the concept of an overlay is that you, for the Crawfordville town plan area, you would leave existing zoning in place. Some of it's zone C4, C2. It's kind of a crazy quilt. There's a lot of different zoning there. So instead of changing the underlying zoning, what you're doing now is saying, okay, we're going to put some new standards or regulations on top of you that are a little bit different. And our new overlay, this new blanket, is going to amend what you can do. One thing is sidewalks. You're going to require these people to do sidewalks. What are some of the other things, Louis, in your overlay?
Reduce parking.
Reduce parking is a good example. And different landscaping standards. But it's not comprehensive yet. What I've suggested is it just might be better to say, look, let's clean the slate, because there's such a crazy quilt pattern of zone districts here. Let's tailor a new zone district that is really tailored for this area, so that you would change the parking regulations and have you'd have a new table of parking standards that would be much reduced from elsewhere in the county. You'd have some new landscaping standards, so that maybe you'd have better landscaping standards. You would have some of the other incentives that we talked about. You'd allow the on-street parking to be counted. So you'd in effect have a tailored zone district just for the downtown. In the long run, I have a hunch something like that would work better. But then The downside of that is you're going to change things on people. You know, there's going to be, oh God, the county's going to come in and change things, and you have to go through a process to do that.
Yeah, actually, what we propose in the overlay is that we set aside the numbers for the new zoning districts. But our concern is, there are a lot of uses there that are residential, that are in the town plan will be commercial, and we want to allow them to stay. And we also don't want commercial going up next to residential. So, the way we've envisioned it, the overlay will lead to zoning districts specific to Crawfordville. But I did want to, maybe in our discussion this afternoon, just talk about how we can address the transition.
Yeah. And the overlay may be the way to do that, to do some quick fixes, and I think that's what you're doing, some quick fixes now, what you ought to do, and then think perhaps a little bit longer and come back and do a new zone. And I had forgotten that you do, at the end of that overlay, you've listed, reserved some new sections for town center.
I was involved in an overlay that put mixed use on an interstate exit. My competition went 500 yards down the same street in another county and built a $45 million development because I had a mixed-use overlay. I couldn't use the property. 15 years ago that was done. 15 years later, that overlay is still sitting there. It's deteriorating. Nothing happened.
So it's mandatory mixed use.
Yes. Now that's one of my things. If you want to build mixed use, have at it. Just don't require it. The mandatory is the secret.
We're not. I don't think anybody suggested it. There are some jurisdictions that do, but we're not suggesting that.
Hopefully, I won't see anything more after this. On the goodness, I lost my train of thought. You got that, Liz? No, I'll pick it up in a minute. I just lost it.
I wanted to, I think you had talked about linear development, or somebody else asked about linear development. I know John has proposed our town centers, and the area near the courthouse, that grant application that we submitted to design a town square, will I think accomplish some of what you think is essential for a town, to have a town square, because we have room back there, potentially all the way to the Crawfordville Elementary. It's a huge area that could be just a wonderful town square for Crawfordville.
I asked you in the very beginning, you probably forget this, but if you're in the old 200-300-year-old developments, I guess the city fathers platted a square. They built a courthouse. They platted the properties around the square, and then they sold off. South of the courthouse and west of the courthouse is a lot of land.
Right.
Of course, we don't have any money, but there's a lot of land there. If you had an idea, if you wanted to build a square, which all towns do, all the old towns, the ones we're talking about, that's, you could do that possibly.
Right, we submitted a grant to do that.
One of the things I did remember, after you get to be 90, you sort of forget
Hey, I'm there with
trains of thought. Fortunately, you still got about 50% of what you used to. If you looked at the land, if you looked at each individual lot as you go up inside of our town plan, and you think of what business can use that lot or whatever, There are very few, because of the streets, the way the depth coming off of 319. Some of them may have depth, they have no frontage. A retail business, a minimum retail business, got to have 150, 200 feet. Anything less than 150, according to side setbacks and stuff. If it doesn't have depth, the front doesn't help any if it doesn't have depth. So a lot of our properties, we are right now restricted. Fortunately, some of them are not restricted, but there are extremely few properties right now that can take any large development at all. It's going to be mom and pop locations, totally. When this county grows, and it will grow because we've got a great school system, and our surrounding counties do not have. We got a number 10 or less school system in the state. When the state employees come to the state and they've got children, they're going to look down here and they're going to say, we want our kids raised in Wakulla. That'll happen. So our county is going to grow. We're going to go to 70,000 people plus, but at some point in time we'll be there, and it won't be very long when the economy comes back. This town plan, the properties within the town plan will be gone like that. It won't take 20 minutes for the available properties that can have a development on them to be gone like that. I like to call them businesses for people. Other people call them strip centers. But the independent the independent people who rent those centers, rent those spaces, that's their business. They can't go out and build a building and do that. So we provide a service for the people the small individual, not the franchise necessarily, who rent those spaces. But right now, our town plan, there's not but 2 or 3 places that's got 400 foot of frontage. I mean, we are tight on frontage. When you have to buy multiple lots, and then that gets expensive and so forth. But our town plan, for whatever purpose, it will grow out in 10 years. In 10 years, we will have an inadequate availability for 80% of the businesses who want to come to town. And that's nothing right or wrong. You know, I can't say that's right or wrong.
That happen.
Well, it will, in my opinion, it will happen.
But I think some of what we've talked about is by reducing the size of the building footprint and reducing the parking and so forth.
Setbacks. Right now,
The
like
setbacks,
your
right.
C2 district requires
Well, I can,
side yard setbacks, buffers, all this and that, plus the parking. So you should be able to get a more efficient building layout.
yeah, you can, yeah.
Making it possible to
We're gonna, I think, we're wanted to take a break, and then we're gonna start up at 1:30 again. So we're gonna now come back with some specifics to you all, but I hope we've been able to give you a quick
Thank you.
thumbnail of what's going on.
I really appreciate what you talked about today. I hope we can implement some of this quickly.
We're gonna come back with some recommendations.
Some of the stuff that we all agree on, because there's stuff we all agree on, we should work on getting that done, and then fight over the stuff we fight over.
One of the quick fixes would be your architectural look of your community. That needs to be fixed before we have another Walmart. I don't mind Walmarts. I hate their landscaping with a passion. You know what our nicest property is in town today? Our nicest landscape property, Burger King.
These franchises can, and your architect can tell you, Dale can tell you, these franchises.
Blame it on me.
They know how to do really good urban style facade.
Well, the problem is you work in multiple jurisdictions. I've got things going
Exactly.
on in Amelia Island. I mean, you travel back and you see those very things. You have to work inside other LDRs.
But it depends on what they're asked for. I can show you Walmart in Douglas County,
But I think the clients also realize the value. I mean, Burger King also realized the value of being a good corporate citizen.
I'll bring you one. I'll bring you 2, maybe 3.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who's participating. We really do.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn the workshop.
Make a motion. I second. I make a motion with adjourn.
All right, excellent. So done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Got your sign when you build it, and then everybody goes out and puts a sign up.